lots of folk follow Andrew Tate. So why do you believe them on this issues? On these issues, because I do. I've chosen to believe them. And how dare you suggest that it may not be true? If it turns out not to be true, I shall claim that I was just asking questions.
In this video, you're going to see Nigel Farage be absolutely ridiculous in an interview with Nick Ferrari, and James O'Brien completely dismantles him. You're not going to want to miss this one. And as always, I'll give you my full thoughts at the end of the video.
Have a little listen to this. Taxi driver once told me that Nigel Farage is a racist liar.
Whenever he says something like this that sounds absolutely crackers, in the end, there always proves to be some truth in it.
You think Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs?
I'll have a tenner with you that,
Right.
within the next month or so, we find some evidence of it.
It's 12 months. The idea that Haitians are eating cats and dogs in Springfield. If you can prove it, I've got my £10 ready.
Well, if you can prove it hasn't happened, the other way
But
around.
are you prepared now to say that that one was utterly nonsensical?
If I said to you that swans were being eaten in royal parks in this country, that carp were being taken out of ponds and eaten in this country by people who come from cultures that have a different... Would you agree it's happening here?
I've certainly read... I didn't know about swans. I've read about carp being fished,
well, there you
yes.
go. So, look, neither of us can prove
But
or
who
disprove
are
this.
taking the carp and the swans?
People who come from countries where that's quite acceptable
Well,
to
I've
do
read
so.
headlines that it's Eastern Europeans, Romanians and people like that.
So I believe.
Is that what you've heard?
So I believe.
So it's a similar sort of story. They're eating
Similar story.
They're eating our carp, they're eating our swans.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that. I'm just putting it back as an argument.
It's a story that goes back to, perhaps inevitably, the Sun newspaper from about 20 years ago. And it was lies then, and it's lies now. But have a little listen to the beginning of this, because this is how liars operate. You make a bet that proof will be provided of something within a month, that Haitians are eating... So this is racism. You're supposed now to think that foreigners are going to eat your pets. Haitians are eating cats, Haitians are eating dogs. So, it's all jolly backslapping fun, trebles all round. Let's have a bet about it. Let's not wonder what it's like to actually be one of the people who is being lied about, either directly or by association. Eastern Europeans all eating swans. It's a lie. If it was provable, if it was true, you would never stop hearing about it, but the truth doesn't matter to these people. Here is what you do. Here is what you sound like if you have absolutely no integrity. Pay attention.
In the end, there always proves to be some truth in
There
it.
proves to be some truth in
Haitian
it.
immigrants.
I'll have a tenner with you that within the next month or so, we find some evidence of it.
There you go. We will
What
find
the
some
scale of it
evidence
is,
of it. That's
I've
the
no
bet.
idea.
We'll find evidence.
But you do
But
think
now,
some cats and dogs
fast
are being
forward,
eaten.
12 months later.
If you can prove it, I've got my £10 ready.
Well, if you can prove it hasn't happened.
But that wasn't the bet,
Are you
Nigel.
prepared
The
now to
bet
say
was that within a month evidence would
If I said
emerge.
to you that swans
And it
were
hasn't.
eaten
So what do
in
you
royal
do?
parks in this country,
You swivel,
carp were being
you
taken out of
slime,
ponds and
you
eaten in this country
squirm.
by people
And now
who
you're
come from
telling lies
cultures
about this
that have a
country. You're
different-
telling lies
Would you
about our
agree
neighbours.
It's happening here.
Our
I've certainly
friends,
read- I didn't know
our
about
Eastern
swans. I've read
European
about carp
colleagues,
being
Yeah, well, there you
fished,
go.
yes.
who
So,
do not eat swans. Why does it feel so controversial to describe a racist lie as a racist lie? It's actually become more controversial in this country. It's become a bigger problem to accuse a racist of racism than it has to actually be a victim of it. And the whole two-tier nonsense is a big, big part of that. Dan's in Dover. Dan, what would you like to say?
I really like the idea of trying to simplify this. I think we're giving the Farages and the Trumps just far too much credit. The way I see it, there was a dam growing up for me, where on the other side of the dam was all the racism and the horrible stuff, and that was the underbelly, as it were. And for me, the dam has cracked, and I think it's we've been the proverbial boy sticking our finger in it, sort of to try and stop it over the last sort of 20 years. But Farage and Trump are the crack; they've let it through. So I don't know. It's always been there. And again, I should have caveated, I'm coming at this as a 44-year-old white male, so I'm coming at this with pure privilege. But
It's not only been there. There's also Tinder, isn't there? I don't mean the dating site. There's also people who can be persuaded. And that's what this rhetoric is designed to do. So the first thing you do is you unleash the hardcore racists, all right? And
they're already ready. Yeah, they're ready to go.
You get that up and running. And that has happened as a consequence, perhaps. I mean, it was Stephen Yaxley Lennon, of course, that Nigel Farage relied upon. Oh, no, Andrew Tate that he relied upon for his information
it would have been
about the Southport killing. So you get the actual hardcore, full-on, what you might describe as the National Front legacy, but then you go to work on everybody else, and that's where the lies become really important, because you're telling people to be frightened. You're telling people that if there is some scumbag sex offender in a asylum processing centre in Epping, then you should be frightened of every single person in there.
Terrified, yeah.
And imagine if a politician had a nephew who was a sex offender. Would anybody argue that means we should be suspicious of everybody with the same name, or everybody from the same family, or everybody of the same ethnicity? It would be absolutely absurd. But if it's an asylum seeker, then politicians are prepared to go down that very ugly road, that very dark road. And that's where the tinder kicks in. So people who were not anything close to National Front level attitudes are being successfully frightened and terrorised is the word that I'd use. And lies about eating pets and eating swans is a wonderful example of precisely that.
But your last caller nailed it, I think, and I hadn't thought of it until I was sitting waiting to talk to you and listening to him. And he said, Trump said, an awful thing, whatever it was, and Keir Starmer just was stood next to him, and he kind of smiled meekly and said, well, he's actually a friend of mine.
Well, that was what else could he have done?
Stamping on the Tinder before.
Do you want to punch him?
I'm not sure. No. That in that specific situation, absolutely. I don't know what he could have done.
Yeah.
But on a grander reductionist scale, it's like I think those people who are swayed, who are scared, haven't got the grown-up to turn around and look up to who says, no, this is wrong.
And then, you're right. And that's the kind of leadership that Starmer could be providing. And there are suggestions he's about to start trying, but it may be too little too late. And he is not, so far, a particularly inspiring figure. It's also why I am very interested in this slightly self-aggrandizing observation about how few people there are in the space that they keep telling us is absolutely full to bursting with anti-woke warriors and anti-racist activists. And, I suppose it's why they couldn't cope with Black Lives Matter, because for a moment there were actually quite a lot of people standing up against racism and kneeling down against racism, and their little tiny heads exploded.
They realise, we're not the majority, actually, we really aren't.
Yeah.
And it's the majority that are getting scared. It sounds so silly, but it's such a superficial, silly thing. It's consciousness. If you just say, this is all lies, this is all shit, I think that's what it is as well. There's no kid shouting that the emperor hasn't got any clothes on. Even when you do, it's getting drowned out, and I don't understand why. They've managed to make the fear drown that out, and we need something, hopefully Keir Starmer, because he's got the platform. Ed
Davey went there yesterday, actually, but again, where's the coverage? Where are the clips?
I've always liked Ed Davey, and I've always liked the Lib Dems, but for some reason, you always get that they don't. And I just don't know why people have that attitude about them.
Where does it end, I wonder? It's a funny one, isn't it? Because,
there's a lot of talk online about the Green Party, and it's like, is
any port in a storm?
Change? Are we witnessing an extinction? Yeah, but are we? Yeah, well, exactly. Are we witnessing an extinction of an actual whole system and a whole way of thinking? Is this their death throes?
I don't side with anybody when it comes to science.
You wouldn't side with the medical experts who say it's dangerous nonsense?
I wouldn't. When it comes to science, I don't side with anybody.
Right. You don't.
No, I don't side with anybody. Because science is never settled, and we should remember that.
Says a very stupid person, so let's ignore him. But that very stupid person is poised, or certainly currently poised, to be in charge of our health service. Imagine having somebody in charge of the health service who doesn't really think that science is settled on most medical issues. You don't have to imagine it if you live in the United States of America, and you may not have to imagine it if you live here. But on this very specific question, the ludicrous claim that there's a link between paracetamol and autism, why is Farage frightened of the truth? Mark's in Wimbledon. Mark, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Look, I think what I noticed this morning by listening to that excruciating interview...
Rather you than me, mate.
Well, I made myself do it. I just thought I had to. But one of the kind of the rules of argument that he tries to assert is to kind of challenge people to prove that what is claimed is not true. Do you know what I mean? So you turn it around. That way you can claim, for example, that people are eating dogs and cats, because Nick Ferrari couldn't claim that they're not. So therefore, he didn't lose the bet. Now, the same, he tried to...
You can never prove a negative, can you?
Well, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
But if you can try to convince people that that is the rule of debate, you can then claim anything you like, because anything can be claimed, because the truth cannot be proven. So, once you've established that, and that's what he was kind of trying to do. And in terms of the link with autism, I mean, the idea that science is never settled is kind of true in a way, because something is only true until it's proven not to be.
Of course.
And then he says, well, look at thalidomide, and nobody knew that was dangerous till it was found that it was. So in some ways, it's kind of correct, but it's also meaningless. I mean, as a clinician, I could tell people not to take their antipsychotics because it causes cancer. There's no link, there's no evidence of that, but I can't prove that it won't someday be the case. It's like doctors telling people not to take antihypertensives because they can't. One day, that may be shown. It's a completely meaningless argument. It's just turning science on its head. It means nothing.
And he wants to do that because it means that, not unlike Donald Trump, it becomes easier at every turn, every moment like this, to peddle blatant untruths as truths.
Well, yeah, you can get out things that you've said that turn out to be nonsense. So he didn't find any evidence that people were eating Dalton cats, but he can get out of that. He can reverse that by saying, well, you can't prove that they are.
It's so transparent, isn't it? I think you're right. I think this is the going to be the basis of the big answer, the overall answer. But it's so I just find it so frustrating that someone so obviously awful gets away with such obviously awful behaviour.
Well, it is obvious. I think it's obvious to me. It doesn't take me very long to listen this morning thinking this is actually quite intellectually deficient. Yes. You know what he reminds me of? I can't remember who came up with this quote. I think it may have been Elizabeth Bowen. But there's this concept of a stupid person's idea of a clever person. Are you familiar with that?
Yes,
the idea that at first listen, it appears actually quite intellectual, quite clever. But once you work out that it's kind of inherent stupidity, the whole thing falls apart. I think the problem with social media is that, the stupidity becomes great. The collective stupidity becomes greater than the sum of its parts. So people get together. The people today celebrating what a fantastic interview that was and how Farage smashed it. People are just not thinking. There's just a lack of critical thinking.
Well, I mean, it could perhaps have been a little bit more robust, but that's a matter of opinion. How you end up at the opinion that claiming that you never side with anybody over science is somehow smashing it or getting all of your information. I suppose a taxi driver is a step up from an alleged rapist and people trafficker, so that might be a positive, that might be a win. But you're right, ultimately, in that nonsense becomes not just true, but it becomes received wisdom in the world that you describe, and he's very much part of that world.
Yeah, but it doesn't take much to kind of see through it. But I think people really do need to start just thinking much more critically, because it is, I agree with you, it is so transparent, but people just, it's like the Daily Telegraph. It just becomes the truth. It becomes the reality.
They've changed. I presume you don't take the Telegraph, but they've.
I don't take it. But
no, I think they've. The last couple of weeks, they've had no unhinged headlines on their comment pages. I think either we've got to them, or there's been a change of personnel or something like that. But no, I take your point. Jacob Rees-Mogg was writing in their pages yesterday about why he wants Donald Trump to be Prime Minister. And that is, of course, the devout Catholic and Christian Jacob Rees-Mogg, essentially shilling there for a self-confessed sex offender. But hey-ho, on we go. Mark, thank you. I mean, that's a big answer, isn't it? But what else is there? Why else? It sounds like a bit too much of a mission to denigrate truth entirely in this specific case. How can anybody trust Andrew Tate and anonymous taxi drivers to be giving them the facts, but not doctors and scientists to be giving them the evidence-based conclusion? That's actually worth focusing on just for a moment, isn't it? So who do you trust, Andrew Tate? Oh, and an anonymous taxi driver in Buckinghamshire.
There are extreme ends of this that want us to become a country that follows their customs.
And where do you see that? Give me an example where that's been demonstrated recently. I'm assuming you're talking about...
I've met taxi drivers that have told me that. I've met taxi drivers that have told me, we will have Sharia law in Britain, you will live by our rules.
Okay, any proof that what they're saying is true? No, I just believe them because they told me. Lots of folk follow, what did he say? Lots of folk follow Andrew Tate. So why do you believe them on this issues? On these issues? Because I do. I've chosen to believe them. And how dare you suggest that it may not be true? If it turns out not to be true, I shall claim that I was just asking questions. I was just asking questions. So who did you believe? Andrew Tate. Who else on the Sharia law? A taxi driver. Where? Buckinghamshire taxi driver, Buckinghamshire. You don't know him, he goes to a different school. OK, let's talk about medicine. Oh, yeah, I don't trust any of them. What? What if a taxi driver told you that there was no link between Tylenol? That's what we need to do. Get a taxi driver, or indeed Andrew Tate, to tell him that there's no link between Tylenol and paracetamol, and he'd probably believe it to be true. Because when it comes to science, I don't side with anybody. But when it comes to taxi drivers and alleged people traffickers, I know exactly whose side I'm on, says Nigel Farage.
Right, so this is painful for so many reasons, right? Because, I mean, O'Brien's the way O'Brien dissects Farage's betting strategy is just brilliant, right? Like, the original bet was that evidence of Haitians eating pets would emerge within a month. When no evidence is materialised, Farage simply shifted the goalpost. Well, you can't prove it hasn't happened. And it's like betting someone like you'll find unicorns in Hyde Park, then claiming victory when you can't prove unicorns don't exist. And surely, I think Nick Ferrari should have kind of called out the burden of proof, right? If you're making an outlandish claim, then it's on you to kind of prove that claim. Otherwise, you know, it's very difficult to prove something's not happened, right? If Farage is accusing Haitians of eating pets, then it's on him to find evidence of that claim, which he hasn't and didn't. But he just continuously worms around the question. And I think it's just the strategy he uses, and he always backtracks and says, oh, well, I don't know. Well, it could be true. It could not be. And it's this dangerous rhetoric that I also hear Farage supporters kind of peddling out as well, where they make a baseless claim. And when you ask a very, very basic question on why they believe that, they get defensive, they deflect, or they try to ask you a question back. I'm going to call it the Farage formula, and it's a position that all Reform voters seem to be taking. And I think the most worrying thing was I saw a YouGov poll come out where it's looking bleak, and I'll try and actually share it on the screen just to show you how much of the United Kingdom is swinging towards Reform, and it's worrying and it's dangerous. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. And I'm really keen to get your thoughts on this one. And I'll catch you in the next video.